Sir, if there is no God, there is no such thing as human rights. If there is no God, sir, we are all hunks of primordial slime evolved to a higher order. If there is no God, your birth is an accident, your death is an accident. The only thing that lies between those two accidents is another accident, your life. There's no such thing as a human right. There's no such thing as human dignity if there is no God. If there is no God, we're all glorified slime evolved to a higher order. And to sit out here and talk about human rights as if they were absolute, as if they were objective, is a trip into La La Land, fantasy land.
I wanted to talk about a thought that used to be common sense in the past, but has become forgotten, and now might be considered a hot take. And this thought is, why keeping religion out of government is nonsensical. To start off, the very existence of law necessitates an objective good. And by objective, I mean an objective dimension that exists outside of physical reality and space-time. This objectivity is filled with patterns that order our existence. Things like the cycle of life and the good, right? The cosmic clock. If nothing is true regardless of time, space, culture, or opinion, then you can't really have politics or government. Because if there isn't an objective good and everything is relative or dependent on personal opinion, then you wouldn't be able to hold anyone to any sort of behavior. Because at the end of the day, that's what the law is, right? It's an objective truth claim. And given that the law requires a metaphysical, objective good to exist, and that this objectivity and the patterns concerned with it are designed in a way that engenders life and good outcomes, it can be inferred that a higher power and intention put those laws there. All of human knowledge and experience conveys that order and design always comes from intention and agency, from a mind. Anyone who's ever been on Christian YouTube has probably seen those Cliff Connectly videos where he talks about how, from the totality of human knowledge, we know that design never comes from randomness or chaos. Design typically requires an intention and purpose behind it. So you can see that the foundations of political society are inseparable from a belief in a higher power and intention, right? A God. Politics and government becomes nonsensical if you don't believe in a higher intention. If you're an atheist and you believe the truth, right, the good and the bad is relative, then you have no basis to hold anyone to any sort of behavior or law. Because if there is no good or bad, and all actions are equal, right, from charity to murder, it's all the same, it would then follow that anyone is allowed to do whatever they want. And society would collapse, right? The purge would become a reality. And this is why atheism and secularism are cancers to any society that they enter into. In my opinion, atheists really shouldn't be allowed in government for this very reason, right? Because atheists love to critique tradition and objective value structures. Many atheists are, in fact, unknowingly possessed by the spirit of deconstruction. And in Christianity, the spirit of deconstruction is represented by the character of Satan, or Lucifer. Typically, whenever Satan shows up in the Bible, he's always trying to poke holes in God's logic and get people to not follow his will. In atheists, they always try to do the exact same thing. And my point with this here is that if you're going to critique something, then it must be done with the end goal of encouraging the good. It's kind of like the old rule, with artists. Don't critique someone unless you're also willing to offer an alternative. Humanity's values, thoughts, and laws are like a house. And you only want to tear down your house if you're going to renovate or repair it. If you tear a house down and you don't build anything in its place, you'll have nowhere to live. And many atheists, they critique and deconstruct objective morality and tradition without leaving anything better in its absence. And at the end of the day, this is the danger of these secular atheistic politics. If everything is relative or subjective, then there is no God and there is no good. And you can see historically that when society lacks the idea of an objective good, everything begins to become unjust and evil. All laws become based on force and indoctrination rather than consensus and understanding. It's consistent with the logic and thinking of modern secular governments. And it's why recent governments have been trying to get more and more power, because they know that their exploitative, power-hungry laws aren't aligned with God and the good. The ruling classes, right, these bankers, these commercialists, they know that the people are never going to consent to their immorality. And this is because they lack an understanding of objective good, right? So they have to use the threat of force, the threat of ostracization, right? Cancel culture, and the surveillance state in order to keep us in line. And we can see these things commonly happen in atheistic secular governments. If the leaders of society believed in God and the good, and they acted in this manner, they would not require such a strong state to maintain society. Because contrary to modern secular ideology, people have a tendency towards the good, and they will consent to a good government or political system. If you look at the best and most popular laws and cultural changes throughout the history of the West, the philosophical and legal precedent tends to be based on Christianity in the example Jesus gave us to follow. Both feminism and chivalry are ideas that come from early Christianity, which was led by women. Charity and the modern university and academic systems originate from the Catholic Church. The abolition of slavery in the United States and the UK, these were political movements led by Christians. Right? And this is the same with the civil rights movement with MLK. Anti-racism has always been based on the precedent set by the parable of the Good Samaritan. Jesus' Sermon on the Mount and his parables like the Good Samaritan are the political basis for law in the Western Hemisphere. Even if you're not a Christian and you don't believe in God, you still have to acknowledge that all of these laws are based on Christian values. If you take God and religion out of politics and law, and you keep installing atheists as leaders of society, then you're going to end up erasing the foundation of our anti-racism and civil rights laws and our women's rights laws. And you're also going to risk losing other good laws too, right? Like freedom of speech and workers' rights. Because atheists are relativistic and don't believe in God or the good. So they'll change their laws depending on whether or not it's convenient to that specific circumstance. So what's going to happen is you'll end up with a chaotic, tyrannical society like France during the Reign of Terror, or the Stalin era of the USSR. And these were both atheistic secular governments that sought to take God out of politics. So can we please stop spouting this nonsense about the separation of church and state? Because first of all, it's based on a misinterpretation. That term isn't in any legal documents like the Constitution or anything. It's from a letter that Thomas Jefferson wrote to a priest who feared about the government overreaching on church rights. So it's not about keeping religion out of government. It's actually the other way around. Any political system, if it's going to exist, it has to include God and the objective good in its functioning. God is so integral to government that any government or any sort of politics cannot exist without him. Without the idea of God and government, society will end up experiencing moral degradation and will collapse into a chaotic tyranny. If you're an atheist or a relativist, you should really reevaluate your belief system because it stands on quicksand. If everything is dependent on personal opinion, then why should I listen to anything you say, any knowledge you have, or any claim you make? There's no reason for me to, because if everything is subjective, then it's just your opinion. And why should I follow your opinion over mine?